All right. Hello, everybody. I want to welcome you to this Integrity Short-Term Care Initiative webinar today. And I'm joined here with my fellow cohort in crime here, Dennis Reiner, and we're doing GOT groups today. And you know what? Dennis just loves me to death because he knows that, we put these things together, and I talked about this on one of the other webinars we did. When we get to some of these fringe subjects, we always Dennis and I have been doing this for a long time. We've given 8-hour trainings, 2-day trainings, or 1-day trainings, or 4-hour trainings on how to sell groups and why groups are cool for extended care. And then we were in this short-term care initiative, of course, and we always have to kind of wait and weigh in where we think our audience will be and how deep we want to go, because, we don't want to pull you into the forest so far that you end up saying, oh boy, I'm just going to hang up my hat and not even do anything because this looks so confusing and so scary and so deep. So long story short is we always try to hit the easy button. And Dennis is going to agree with me. I said he loves me because I send him over the PowerPoint like 3 minutes before we start, because I'm saying, all right, we talk about our ideas and what we're going to do. And then I get 4 phone calls and 5 interruptions, and we put together something. But at least one thing is that when you have Dennis on the phone, and hopefully myself to a certain degree, you've got a lot of years of experience. So don't worry, we're not throwing something together where we don't know what we're talking about. We're just trying to decide how much we dare simplify it without confusing you. So hopefully you'll see that that's all going to be worth your time today. And I want to definitely welcome you to this webinar, and thank you for taking your valuable time to jump on with us. And again, this group market is going to be a little bit different because of the fact that, we want to tell you about it and show you the unbelievably great opportunities there are, but we don't want to scare you either. So if you have first time on this call, I apologize. I actually see a couple names that look a little bit newer that maybe I haven't been on any of our calls. You know that I usually jump on my soapbox and spend a little bit of time talking about the need for long-term care overall. And, this kind of fits because we're selling extended care products by and large more than even long-term care because of the shifting market. And when it comes to associations or worksite, remember the fact that this is something a lot of people are going to use. 70% of the folks are going to have some type of extended care once they hit age 65. And we'll talk today about there is a younger market out there too that desperately, a lot of them will need these type of care as well. So we want to make sure you know how important it is. So look at the recordings that we have on our website as we finish up today. And we'll talk about that a little bit, about how these products are so important, and there's something you just really are doing a great service for people. And of course, we'll talk today about why it's important for you, and it'll help you as an agent out in the field or as an agency to go out and keep that persistency up and keep making more money. And the group market just enhances that. So Dennis, I don't know if you want to just real brief, we'll go through really quick on the shifting market, maybe the maps really quick, just to show people about that part of it. And then we're going to jump in if that's okay with you.
Sure, Tom. Yeah. And this is consistent with what we're talking about with the extended care, what we call the short-term care market, long-term care. Back in the day and Tom and I have been doing this for many, many years, it was primarily an upper age market selling. It was average age was 72. And then the market began to shift, and the carriers on the individual side, whether it was traditional long-term care or asset-based or hybrids, began to get more finicky with the underwriting. All the while, the other shift in worksite in particular came where the average buying age was coming down and there was underwriting concessions. And so we parlayed some of that shifting of the market with worksite into the extended care. And that's why those products, as Tom said, are so strong, because they have less underwriting, they're less moving parts, and they're less costly. And available to you right now is those 3 Integrity sponsored products: the GTL Recover Cash, the OmniFlex from Manhattan Life, and then the Wallaby. And you can see here the map. We're always going to end up with a shortfall of states just because of the nature of how the regulators look at these extended care products, and both on the home care side and, as Tom just flashed before that, the short-term care side. And so you'll see mid-30s at best, and then you'll see the purple, and the previous slide you'll see the gray, and that's where that True Freedom product comes into play that you first maybe talked about before, which is a non-insurance product, but it gives coverage in the states where we don't have coverage. And so as you move into groups and worksite, that may not be the case. You may have more coverage opportunities depending upon the product that you're going to deploy, but that's at least how the landscape looks with the extended care and the home health care. And whether you're talking to individuals or talking to groups, it always is still about preparation, and it's about education. In particular, there's some things that you'll do differently when we get into talking about some of the blocking and tackling with worksite. But just be aware that there's some great reasons, and Tom's going to list some of the reasons here why the group market is so darn strong. Whether we're talking about the employer base, that's what we mean when we say worksite. We're talking about the employer-employee relationship. When we're talking about associations, we're talking about the affinity, and they can be large or small in both respects in terms of in this group market.
You bet. Yeah, and thanks, Dennis. And I left that slide in there because of the fact that one of the things we're going to talk about today as we finish up, and we won't get you too far in the weeds. And I know some of you on this call are like, well, what are you doing here? I'm selling med stops or I'm selling final expense. I'm not really diving into the group market, or I haven't done that in the past. And we're going to talk about the similarities. That's why I left that slide in there, because it's so similar to what we see in the regular traditional market. And one of the things we go through as we do this today, again, we're not going to put you through a 2-day course. We're going to just tell you a little bit of a broad, sky's eye view of this. And, for example, with worksite, one of the main things that worksite does, and we're just going to spend a minute, there's one slide that we'll have here coming up talking about managing human capital. I like using that human capital line because one of the carriers used it, and I always thought, this sounds so hardcore. It's like, you're nothing but human capital. But you're going to see the reason I left it in there more is to let you guys know that this is such a personal, conversational type product that we're talking about. You're really helping people at the core, and you're going to see that hopefully even in this short webinar today. I use human capital almost tongue in cheek because from an employer's perspective, yeah, that's kind of what they are. We'll talk about the 3 R's and stuff. But at the end of the day, we're realizing this is an important product for everybody, okay? And we'll have a slide on that. We're going to talk about the fact that a lot of you already know, but there's really a lot of volunteer caregivers in America overall. And obviously a ton of those volunteer caregivers are out there juggling work and play and trying to help people in the sandwich generation with their kids and their parents, or just with the elderly. There's a lot of people out there who are helping mom and dad on the side, and maybe some of you on this call are in that spot where, yeah, I've had to take a couple days off work, or I've had this and that. So we'll talk a little bit about the implications of that on the work site, and that kind of fits into association too, Dennis. And again, I'm going to pull Dennis in quite a bit on some of these things when we say brief discussion. And I won't kid you guys. This is because I was putting together this as we talked about how we're going to handle this today. I thought, well, I'm going to throw Dennis a bone since I'm going to give him this presentation 3 minutes before. That I'll remind him that, I have slides coming or I don't. We just have to talk it over. So part of that was for his use as well as yours. But
the good news, Tom, is we sent over the content, so I pretty much know what we're
exactly. That's what I mean, is he knows. It's just whether he's wondering, are you going to show a slide on tax treatment or anything? And, in this, let's talk just really briefly, if you don't mind, Dennis. And, I'm going to show the rest of these now so we see what we're working with. But when we get to that one on the ER, that's not emergency room, that's employer. So there's really no employer cost for voluntary type plans that they can do. Sometimes they'll put in and they'll pay for part of it, especially when you get into executive carve-outs and stuff. And again, we're not going to pull you too far in the jungle or the weeds today, but there are some tax treatments available with that, Dennis. And I don't know if you want to talk about a little bit of that now, or
Yeah, sure, Tom. I mean, it all depends on if the corporation's a C corporation, that's the pure tax deductibility. It gets a little, and there's schedules that the government puts out every year as to, and they just put out the new 2024 schedule, and both that can affect the individual or it can affect the business. And so whether they're a C corporation, whether they're an LLC, whether they're an S corporation or a sole proprietorship. And so, and or if they're just an individual and wondering what their individual tax deductibility is. And normally it applies to traditional long-term care, because that's how the government with HIPAA brought in that particular legislation to make these benefits have some deductibility on the front end. We're not going to get too deep into the weeds, as Tom said, but it's one of the, if not the only benefit that's available, that where you can deduct it on the front end, you can pick and choose who gets it, and on the back end you can receive it tax-free. So there's really some very attractiveness to a motivating opportunity for both the employee to want to participate and also for the employer to make it available if they're, especially as Tom said, if they're going to carve out and have some contribution to the actual overall premium.
You bet. You bet. And the next one we're going to hit on, that we do have a slide. This is not going to be rocket science to any of you, but it's something that a lot of times, if you're talking to an employer or a head of an association or something, when people talk about extended care, and we talk a lot about that in our other webinars about sales, when we get in there and we say, it's short-term care products and home health care only products that we're stressing in this Integrity Short-Term Care Initiative. But, there is long-term care plans out there. And traditionally, when they got into it, one of the things that's changing, thankfully, but is that whole thing about the myth of, when I think of this long-term care, extended care, I'm thinking about, these are people, my employees aren't even in this boat. My employees are not in a nursing home rolling around waiting for their next game of bingo or for the next meal. So we want to talk about that. A fact is that there are a lot of younger folks, and the fact that these do get used quite a bit often, especially with short-term care. So we'll talk about that in a future slide here in just a minute. But then the other thing we should talk about real briefly, and we don't need to get into deep, because some of the products we don't really have as part of this initiative necessarily. So, we talked a little bit about how deep to go here, but Dennis, maybe I'll hand it over to you. But like long-term care, traditionally, we had like Mutual of Omaha, #1 player in the industry, NGL, big player. There's just not too many big long-term care carriers, and they'll offer sometimes worksite programs, or they'll offer a 5% association discount, for example. And sometimes there's commission hits on them and sometimes not. And Dennis, maybe if you want to talk a little bit just about even some of the new life products that we have that we do have available, in case some of these folks on the phone find a group that they want to talk about deeper. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah, they can certainly reach out to their partner, marketing partner that invite them on this call, and the partner can reach out to us for if it's a product that the partner doesn't have necessarily on their shelves, that we can make available to them, to the partner, so that the partner can make it available to their downline agents. But the products today, they go from the traditional long-term care, where we were talking just a moment ago about the tax deductibility, to looking for the opportunity where we are looking to make some changes in the extended care products and potentially have some future availability for those products. But there is products that in the group space, if you will, that they're a group certificate, but they can go all the way down to in essence one life. And it's a combination product of having a life benefit with a long-term care. And the long-term care component is either, with some carriers, either a 101G and more of a chronic illness rider, or it's actually a true long-term care benefit defined by the government as a 7702B, which means it qualifies to be 100% tax-free. And there is some deductibility that's there. And so, Tom, it's more today, I think the high level part of the discussion is to get you leaning in, just thinking about whether or not you can spot some opportunities. And then, the solution part of it is much easier once you know that you are, going to have an opportunity. You can then reach out to your partner that invites you on this call. They can reach out to us, and we'll collaborate together to find the right and appropriate solution.
Right. And again, for those of you on the phone who are saying, boy, why are we even going here? Because I don't do anything with, with groups and all this different market. When we get to the last points, we'll just briefly discuss a little bit. And we have all these slides for you that, like we said, we could give you a full day training on how to really go out and attack this market. But I think we'll just use some of Dennis's expertise and my own to talk about the fact that, sometimes when we might spend a lot of time about how to get a hold of a benefit broker or how to go out there and look for, chamber of commerce and banks and all these different things to prospect. The funny thing about it, when you get into some of these group markets and some of the best opportunities we've had, believe it or not, and we'll talk about the 3 R's later on, and Dennis will fill you in on that. But the key is a lot of times it's kind of who you're sitting around the fire over in your neighborhood having a beer, and you might decide, oh, you know what, this neighbor is ahead of this huge association, or he's ahead of this chapter, or he's a big employer in town or has some influence. That's really how a lot of the best group opportunities are out there. So we're going to talk about that later too. And kind of talk about the fact that that's really where we're at with this. So with the discounts and the very simple underwriting we talk about and dispelling those old myths, the positive for this, when you do find something and it works out for a group, is the third point from the end here, stays on the books and it's harder to replace. And that's really something that's pretty important, because of that comms. That's not communications. Again, that's commissions. Because one thing about an association or workplace group that you get, that the part that's great with it, and then again, when we do our 8-hour training, Dennis can talk about the fact that he can vouch for me, I guess, is that we tell our agents, don't go elephant hunting. You know what? When you go out there and elephant hunt and say, I'm going to go out and find the biggest employer group or the biggest association in the country and look at all that business. Well, the elephant hunting side of it, once in a while they land and they can be unbelievably great, but most of the time, those are tough, right? And that's why Dennis was excited about this opportunity some of these carriers have, that you can have one life or something. So what we want to let you know is, you don't have to go out elephant hunting. You don't have to roll up your sleeves and do the huge prospecting. As we get into some of these discussions at the end here of this short webinar today, we're going to talk about the fact that there's big strengths to it when you do find an opportunity for a group. Let us help you with our expertise and work with your networking partner or your marketing partner who got you on this webinar, and we can help them help you. Because at the end of the day, it really is one more thing. What do we say in every webinar that we have during this short-term care initiative is, if you're selling Medicare or MAs or final expense or anything like that, it's great, because what? If you get a multiple product in there, it stays in the books better, right? It's harder for people to take away if you have multiple products. Same thing here. If you get these extended care type products into a workplace or an association, think about it when somebody comes out just to an individual and tries to replace it. It's harder to replace, isn't it? Because now, this is through my work. Oh, this is through my association. And because of that, your commissions stay on the books much longer with these types of group situations. So it's just one other plus, that if you do happen to come across a group, or if you do decide to roll up your sleeves and market to a couple of groups, that is the beauty of that type of business. It stays on the books, and sometimes it's much easier to get a bigger block of business in place. So Dennis, and then we're going to come back to at the end. I think we want to hit these couple other slides first, and then we'll come back to some simple insights and steps to success and that ripple effect, et cetera. Does that sound okay to you?
That sounds great. Let's continue on, and we'll share with them about this a little bit more on this human capital, and then jump into some of the other bullet point ones that we just talked about, and go a little bit deeper.
You bet. Again, I love that human capital because it just sounds so hardcore. But at the end of the day, what I talked about earlier is still true. Today's employees, number one, think about yourself and a lot of people there's a lot of white collar jobs in America. It's about 3/4 of the women workforce and about 3/5 of the men are working in white collar jobs where, they don't have to do the hard labor that we had, 50 years ago in America even. So with that, a lot of today's employees do expect to work well past age 65. So number one, it keeps them in tune for themselves. We already talked about the fact that we're going to come and talk about volunteer caregiving and all that effect. So at the end of the day, this is something that's important for people, for themselves, and realizing that it might be something that'll help their families. And that's part of the ripple effect and everything else we'll talk about. Okay. So, the 3 R's of managing human capital, you maybe have heard this somewhere else. And again, there's we'll talk about the other 3 R's later when we joke about it. But at the end of the day, it's, the recruiting talent. There's competitive advantage to employers that offer extra type benefits like this, especially with some of the problems we have in traditional healthcare. So you've seen this switch over where people are saying, I'm going to have a benefit that I pay part of, or have a voluntary benefit for some of my folks to use this. And again, that gets a little deeper about 401ks and keeping that capital in line. But so you not only have a recruiting advantage if you offer other types of products as an employer, and you also reward and recognize your existing employees. So that's one of the things you're talking to about with a worksite type place. And then retaining that best talent for the long run, right? That's where maybe executive carve-outs come in, where you can talk to your people about, boy, you got some good key employees. Why don't we put it together a really strong extended care plan for them and help out with that. So, and it complements and fills the gaps with the existing benefits, like your DI benefits they might offer, the 401k. And that's one of the nice things about the, I guess what you'd say is it makes you look better as an employer. And when I say you, I'm talking about the people you're talking to, of course. And it shows that they care about their employees and they can protect that big nest egg. Remember that 401k, by and large, for a lot of employees out there in America, that's really their only retirement fund, right? They don't have any money in savings. They're spending what they make every month a lot of times. And that 401k is something they count on. And if you can educate them a little bit about the need for care from some of our other webinars, even when we talk about this does happen, 70% of folks will use some type of extended care, and sometimes it'll stretch out for a year or two or more, and that can really attack a 401k. So, and finally, employees or association members, they always appreciate those discounts and that simplified underwriting and the portability, if you're looking at worksite, that these plans travel along with them when they leave, so they don't have to worry about not having coverage after they're done as an employee. And finally, the last one is, people want it. And in the next 6 years, you're going to see the perfect storm as we see some of the things we've talked about in our other webinars, that, boy, this thing's coming to a head. And by the year 2031, all those baby boomers are going to be looking at where they're going to get care opportunities. And it's going to be a big, big topic in the news. And you're going to hear a lot about it in this next few years. So you're starting to already. And Medicare and Medicaid and all those issues, they're not going to be able to pay for it as well as they used to. You can already see the cuts. So all these employees, especially because we have an aging work market, there's a lot of employees out there are going to really be saying, I want to have this through my work site or through my association. It's just one more plus. So Dennis, I don't know if you want to add anything to all that, but it's just kind of.
No, I think that's all good, Tom. I think that it's, again, we're just trying to give you high level overviews as to, why the market is growing, because there is a tremendous amount of sales happening right now. We wouldn't bring the Scott groups to you if we didn't think there was an opportunity. And we have some of our other strategic partners that write millions and millions and millions a year of premium in this particular space. And some are writing them with some of the biggest companies out there, and some are actually targeting, smaller companies, which is what we recommend if you're going to get involved in the space, as Tom said. Although I will share a couple stories, Tom, a little bit later about some successes that people have had. But here's the reality. I think there's around 66 million, a little under 70 million caregivers in America today. And look at this in terms of most care, about 80% of all care today is what we call informal care. That is these unpaid caregivers. And normally it could be family. And certainly when we start looking at what Tom was talking about why corporations get interested in this, a lot of it's about lost productivity, about losing these workers where they have to take time off. And I think we shared with you on an earlier webinar some time back about a MetLife study called the Juggling Act that talked about the cost not only to employers, but the cost to those individuals that find themselves surgically attached to that person's hip that they are actually out of love providing care for. And it does hurt people when they are on the job and suddenly they are, and whether they're an older employee that has a spouse that needs care and they're taking time off for that, or whether they're a younger employee and as part of the sandwich generation realize that they're got the double whammy. They're raising their own kids at the same time that mom and dad are now needing help, and they may have to jump on a plane and fly because mom and dad don't live in the same city. They have to get other siblings involved. So they're taking time away from work. Their own health begins to suffer. That MetLife study showed that was a growing concern that actually caregivers were dying before those they cared for. And the number of days that people miss it's a big burden on companies, and that's why companies want to add it. In addition to all the things companies do with their employee, their EAPs, their employee assistance programs, they if they don't want to have skin in the game, they still want to make it available on a voluntary basis because they know it helps them to reduce that lost productivity. And Tom, that's just something that it's a reality that is continuing to grow. As you said, this silver tsunami that's upon us in the next 7 years is gonna wipe some folks out. And if they don't plan ahead and they aren't prepared, and companies realize that too, they realize that the government can't continue to subsidize and pick up the tab with individuals who aren't taking some individual responsibility. So corporations are being good stewards along the way, and associations like to get involved too, because associations have members and they want their members to have opportunities, and sometimes the associations can participate in some form of a marketing allowance, so they get motivated as well by the success of a program that gets rolled out. But and I'll just pick this one up, Tom, as we go through. If we want to talk about the next aspect, unless you want to make a comment here, I'm just going to talk.
No, and I think it leads in nice, and I'll let you turn over. I'm glad you brought up the fact about associations, because you notice all those stats in there. Obviously, what they talk about is the workplace and working Americans, but associations fit right into that same thing, right? And same thing with this next slide, Dennis. I'll let you keep rolling here, because this is one of those things we talk about. When people talk about extended care, especially long-term care back in the day, that was always that whole huge thing where people were thinking, well, I don't know, this is something for old folks. I don't need to worry about this yet. So go ahead, Dennis. I'll let you.
No, I was going to say, Tom, we've seen the buying age continue to come down in the individual marketplace from that 72 from 20 years ago to now being a pre-retirement sale for those that want to buy either traditional long-term care or extended care plans or asset-based or hybrid plans. But what we've seen in the workplace is, yes, there is the ability in the work site to reward those key executives who might be nearing retirement, and it could be a golden handcuff type situation. But think about, by and large, the rank and file that are in their 30s or 40s. And again, they could be part of that sandwich generation. And we don't like to think that people have, that things are going to happen to people at younger ages. Whether it's as much as even though we're talking about care here today, but it could be people who die in untimely deaths at in their 30s, but there's also people in their 40s, and we give some examples of this, of people who at any age could have a catastrophic illness or a tragic accident, and we all maybe know some of these stories in terms of those. Before she passed away, Pat Summitt, the legendary Tennessee women's basketball coach, in her mid-50s, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and Michael J. Fox with Parkinson's, and Christopher Reeves. I'm sure that as an expert writer, he wasn't planning to fall off his horse and be paralyzed for the rest of his life, but things happen. And I remember some years back there was actually a Miss Arizona, I think it was, and she was in her mid-20s and had a severe stroke that paralyzed her for a period of time. And 1/3 of all stroke victims, by the way, are under the age of 40. So things happen to folks. And again, a lot of times because of competing priorities, if it's on an individual side, they're maybe not thinking about this as much. But if it's the employer that brings it, and there's education that's brought in, either through the worksite approach or through the association approach, they suddenly begin to feel like, hey, there's safety in numbers, there's security in numbers. I'm not just the only one thinking about this now, or maybe this is not me being singled out because of the fact that the average age is that 40% of individuals who are receiving care in this country are under the age of 65. It's a stat that we don't like to hang our hats just on statistics, but it happens more than you think. And I can tell you stories of having done, as Tom has, many, many, many consumer workshops over the years, and have heard tragic stories of younger people who had a family member, a spouse or significant other, and had a tragic accident or something that required them to receive care for a prolonged period of time. So it does happen. It's just that the rich and famous, or those that we normally can associate with a name ID, sometimes those stories are very, very powerful, because of the fact that people can say, "Oh, I know who that is," in terms of and relate to that individual in terms of them having that experience. So, Tom, it's just something to keep in mind, that it is a myth that, hey, this will never happen to me, or it only happens when you get to age 80 and have lived a full life. Dudley Moore was a perfect example of that. Many of them remember him from the movies Arthur and others. And I'll just say one last thing about famous people. It was Dudley Moore that basically said in an interview, he said, "I think I'll have enough," after he was diagnosed with mobility issues and certain things that left him basically unable to work. And he said, "I think I'll have enough to sustain myself," he said in an interview. He said, "But it's strange and sad, after all these years of affluence, that I now have to worry about money." Now, if someone to that level of a Dudley Moore was worrying about money, can you imagine the average individual in their 40s or 50s, where they would be?
Exactly. And that's one of the things that you notice, that last point down there, and you guys hear us pound it over your heads on every one of these webinars, right? Is that, these extended care products, whether it's even traditional long-term care hybrid plans or the life plans, et cetera, whatever it might be, are great for almost any age. But when you look at our short-term care plans and the initiative that we have here, especially, really those are to me a little extra bonus to look at and feel comfortable talking to anybody about it, whether it's an association with any age members just about, or workplace with any age of employees. Because one of the things we see with these short-term care products, remember, is most long-term care that they were used to had that 90-day elimination set up in there, right? Where a 90-day deductible. So that was another reason a lot of people thought, this is nursing home stuff, or stuff when I get older, that Dennis just talked about. But when you look at the short-term care products, you can put this in place, and any employee at any age is going to look at that saying, now, don't forget, there's a lot of people. I had a brother-in-law at a stroke a real young age, and he was fine after, a month or two. It was one of those, they call them the baby strokes, not a TIA, but a regular stroke. But it wasn't, life-threatening. He was at the point where I was like, oh, okay, that really scared me for a long time, but I got over it, and I could go out and play golf again, 6 months later. So there's both sides to it when you get into these products. They can be really robust plans, as you know from our product training. You can write a $1 million policy with some of these short-term care plans. But just as importantly, on the flip side, is that you might have a care situation. I have people in this office here who've had hip replacements and knee replacements and things that they can see a value today or in the near future potentially with these short-term care type products. So it even makes it more attractive. And that's why the group market right now is really hot across the board, because people of any age can see that, oh, you know what? Yeah, I might have other insurance that's going to cover most of that. But remember, these policies pay over and above any other type of insurance. And everybody likes the concept of saying, boy, if God forbid something did happen, or if I needed to get that hip replacement, kind of nice to know if I'm laid up for a while, this will help me out. Or, a knee replacement, or even an accident or injury at a younger age that isn't necessarily life ongoing, but it is something that might lay you up for a few months or even a few weeks. Does that make sense? So that's where I'm hitting on that. And again, the old thing, I think we're fine on that. So now we're just going to open it up, and before we show you the website and stuff, this is obviously just a real overall talking about simple things like some how-to insights that we get into about the group market, where we talk about, prospecting and presenting and fulfillment. We're not going to bury you on that today. but we might give you some good insights. And I know Dennis is going to be great at talking about a little bit about simple things you can do if you decide to look a little closer at the group market. And then before I tell you what the 3 R's that Dennis will talk about, it's kind of funny because I think in every business now you have to have 3 letters of something, right? We talk about real estate, the 3 L's of real estate: leads and listings and leverage. And then you switch that over. Of course, Dennis will tell you probably later, location, right? So that's part of the 3 L's. And of course, there are the 3 R's we talked about with group marketing when I already talked about the recruiting and rewarding your existing employers and retaining your best employees, excuse me. So we'll talk a little bit about that as just a side note, but then the ripple effect is really an important part of this as well. And I have one more slide that'll show that. And that's just an overall commonsensical thing as well. So Dennis, do you have any things, if you had to go, just again, this is one of those areas I kind of threw you a curveball because I didn't really have time to put together this or that slides because we had our extended training that had quite a few slides, and I just didn't know how I could shorten it that quickly. So what do you think is a good thing just to kind of have a discussion about today with the folks on the phone?
Well, Tom, it's you don't have to stop doing what you're doing. The main thing is all you want to do is make sure your antenna is raised up to the point where you're tuned in to looking for opportunities. Because as you said earlier, some of it may be just right underneath your nose with friends. So the 3 R's that Tom's alluding to, and it's a pickup of those 3 L's that we talk about in the real estate game, which is location, location, location. And really the 3 R's represent relationship, relationship, relationship. Those who have the most success, they do it because they can go and they can make that point of contact. And, it's not as if you cannot go big game hunting, whale, going after the whales, if you will, because there are some successes that can happen. But generally speaking, but where we've seen individual agents who don't do this day in and day out have the greatest amount of success, it's probably in the employer marketplace where it's under 100 employees, because they can typically get to a decision maker. And maybe that decision maker is that neighbor that Tom indicated that they're having that beer with. It could be a friend of theirs. It could be someone it could be an existing client, in fact, that they have on the individual side that leads them to this other opportunity. Tom, if this is a good time, there's a couple stories I wanted to share just on how that actually came about for a couple people. I'll tell you a big story success, and I'll tell you just an everyday success. Perfect. Should I share that right now?
Yep, absolutely.
So some years ago, I had the opportunity, one of my territories, and I don't get there as often as I'd like to anymore, but it was the state of Hawaii. And I used to do a lot of training in Hawaii. And of course, living in winter weather, Tom lives in Minnesota, I live in Michigan. I always, when agents would say, "Hey, could you come and do a training in July?" I'd say, "No, I can't do it in July, but I can certainly do it in January or February as so time to get out of that winter weather." And I remember one of the agents I worked with for many, many years, and he came to me one day and said, "Dennis, I have an opportunity." And his name was Peter Rodriguez. And Peter was a very good individual long-term care agent. But it just so happened that he had a very, very close relationship with someone within the state of Hawaii. And this is one of those, stories that when you hear it, it's almost in disbelief that you would think that it really happened. And actually it did happen. We worked with Peter and prepared Peter for an RFP. That's a request for proposal to present to the state of Hawaii for long-term care. And this is one of those stories that you think about. This is like, David and Goliath, in biblical proportions, if you will. And here he was going up against some big, significant benefit brokers, players. And with the help of us, not to say that we did anything more than just prepared his brief and prepared the case, but he actually ended up winning the bid for the state of Hawaii for long-term care. And that was a product at the time, and they're no longer in the long-term care space. They since have sold this book of business, but it was actually Hartford. And Peter, with a handful of agents, spent the next year and several years just basically traveling around the whole state of Hawaii. So I tell you that story only because the fact that Peter, though he was an individual long-term care agent, he had his antenna up and he looked for an opportunity, and an opportunity presented itself when he heard that the state of Hawaii was looking to add long-term care for all their employees. The other story that comes to mind is a certified financial planner that we work with a large broker dealer, and we trained these financial advisors on how to sell long-term care. And mainly, we'd never really done much, but we had a meeting just like the meeting we're having right now, a little briefing on worksite and association opportunities. And Dan took it to heart and said, Dennis, I've got an existing client of mine, and he happens to be a managing partner for a CPA firm. And we ended up helping Dan prepare a presentation, go in. Not only did he get the deal, and there was probably, I think it was under 100 lives as far as the total numbers that were sold. And this is business that now has been on the books probably almost over 15 years. And this is one individual, and it started with his existing client when he understood that there was an opportunity to go in and talk about worksite opportunities to make it available and make that case about why an employer would be motivated to make it available. And actually, in this particular group, it was all employer paid. The employer paid. I don't think they paid for every employee, but they paid for a good portion of that 100 that were senior management type people. I think some of the younger, more rank and file, they just made it available on a voluntary basis. But it's amazing the amount of premium he got out of that. And again, Dan, to this day, is still a financial advisor, still pretty much doing everything on an individual basis, but he has had other opportunities that have come as a result of knowing that an existing client relationship opened up the door to then and keep in mind the whole aspect, whether you're doing associations or whether you're doing worksite, and this leads into the ripple effect that Tom's going to cover next. If you want to bring that visual up, Tom, unless there's a couple more things that you want to add to this particular story, I was just going to make one last comment about that.
No, the only thing about it is remembering that the group market is almost identical to the individual market, except the positive of this. And if I would have had a couple more minutes before here, I would have talked and kind of linked this into an association as well. But you can use your imagination on that. But go ahead, and you want to just talk this. I mean, it's pretty logical what we're talking about. It moves out your center of influence quite a bit. And sometimes, like Dennis said, you'll go out and have just happen upon an employer, and then all of a sudden you start getting key employees, and some of those people have experiences that with it, and then all the employees and the spouses and immediate families, extended families, and there's agents who are just doing a tremendous job. And you can expound upon that, Dennis, the fact that this is one of the best ways to get referrals and widen your scope of influence out there and your opportunity for more sales and obviously to help more people and make more commissions. So go ahead if you want to jump back.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, Tom, I was going to just make one statement that it's really versus the one-on-one that you're normally used to. This is the one-to-many, and the many you may not know when you get out into those extended family member opportunities. And keep in mind, you might have used this opportunity to get into a company, and that company may have been where you're talking about long-term care, but your core business might be Medicare, or it might be another financial product, and suddenly it may open up that door for those other products. And you went through you had a chance to get to those other products because you went through on the long-term care worksite or association push. And I would just keep you in mind that there's all kinds of things you can do. And I'll just give you one last little prospecting. Tom is talking about 401k, and I know, Tom, we want to bring up the site because we're getting close to the end of our time together. So while you're bringing that up, I just want to say one thing about the 401k. I'd like to say I coined this term, and who knows, it's probably been duplicated now many times. But I remember I had people who were experts in worksite marketing that when they heard it, they said, oh my gosh, that's unbelievable. And I said that one of the things that you have to do, and I've said this to you on the individual side, when we're talking about having the conversation about when you want to introduce something new, compare something new to something they already own and understand. And so most people, as Tom said, have a 401k. 401k, other than their home, maybe their most valuable asset. And so if you want to get an attention getter when you're talking to a business or even talking to an association opportunity, you could say something like this. Let me ask you, unless I'm assuming I'm talking to the owner of the company, Tom, what have you done as it relates to with respect to your 401k? What form of insurance protection have you put in place with your 401k program for your employees in the event of a catastrophic illness or tragic accident, that 401k is protected? That employer is going to say, I didn't know that you could buy insurance to protect a 401k. And the answer is, you see, instead of just coming out of left field and introducing long-term care as kind of just added benefit, what you did was you compared it to something he already owned and understood. And now you found a pain point that existed, that you can talk about how putting in place a benefit that provides for long-term care, whether it's asset-based, whether it's traditional, whether it's a combination of the, as we've said, with the products that we have available now to us that go all the way down to One Life, their life with long-term care. The point is, you added the motivation because they understood, maybe not in and of itself of just thinking about the reason why of loss of productivity, but now you hit something that was real important. They want to protect that 401k. So keep in mind, as we share with you our integrity site, all of the resources available, at least with the existing products, and there is additional products that we may have access to, as Tom said, which we do have access to. They're not part of this initiative, and we're happy to share that with your partner that invited you on this call if they are interested in learning a little bit more about some other opportunities in the group space.
Yeah, especially in the group place, Dennis. That's one of the things, and we'll let you guys go here in just a second, but especially in the group place, because it might be something, and this happens all the time in our long-term care business from years ago, and now in the extended care, we see it on our brokerage side as well, where people will say, I actually happen to be a neighbor of the head of the HR of this big organization, or the head association member, like I was joking about or talking about earlier. You might have been sitting around having beers with them, and you start realizing that, God, this might be something perfect fit. And remember, even if you don't want to go there as an agent or as an agency lead, remember, talk to the person who got you on this webinar and talk to your marketer for sure, and ask them and say, I have this group potential. I don't even know how big a potential it is yet, but it might be something because I do have a good relationship with them. Remember the 3 R's Dennis talked about. And if you have that, remember, this is all, most of you or everybody in this call is probably an integrity agent somehow, whether they're through some organization or through GoldenCare or something else. So at some point, we have ways to help them, is what I'm trying to get to. And even if the marketer that got you on this says, well, we don't do any of that, but they're going to know enough from our training with them to say, contact GoldenCare, contact Dennis or myself. We'll find some way to help out and get that agency on track, and we can work out marketing agreements and everything else through the back office. So want to make sure we don't walk away from opportunities. If you know somebody really well, hey, reach out. You never know. And even if you're at a point where you're saying, I don't have time to go out and try to attack this, those are obviously great leads, and we have referral programs and everything else that we can work out to help the agency that got you on this call. So keep that in mind as well. And finally, just remember that here's all the different products we've seen, and all of our training webinars that we have, you'll see all of the same information. IntegritySTC.com is the key that you want to go to, and lots of stats up here. And then we do have that training video. I won't link you there today because we went a little long, which was surprising, and that's good. We had some good information today. But you can view our full webinar showcase right here under the sales. There's now coming up on 50 videos. So you'll be able to see all the videos we've had and some short videos as well. And Dennis has some really powerful fireside chats and sales strategy webinars in there as well. So anything you need to know, we don't have a lot of group information on here because we knew that was pushing a little bit outside the realm of what most agents will be doing. But we do have the knowledge in the background. And if anybody's interested, reach out to your marketer and they can get a hold of us if they need some help from us as well. Does that sound fair? So that being said, I tell you, Dennis, unless you have any closing thoughts, I appreciate your time and expertise again. And the next step for you folks on the line, before I let Dennis jump in, is take care of business, take care of yourself, contact the marketer that got you on this call, tell them I want to get appointed with those integrity short-term care products out there, and we have that on the website as well. Right up, if you go to our website, there's a little place about get appointed, and we're not stealing agents away. Don't worry about that. All we're going to do is track down which of our partners got you on the call, and we'll make sure that we get you set up appropriately. So get appointed if you haven't done it. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Dennis, but I want to thank you from my side that I really appreciate you jumping on this call today with us and listen to what we had to say. And hopefully we'll have some opportunities to be on another webinar together. Dennis, anything else you want to add as we close?
Tom, I think you've said it all, and I think just the main thing is just sometimes get outside your comfort level and just again, don't stop doing what you're doing, but just make sure that you look for opportunity, because one opportunity may lead you back into your core product, and it may surprise you just of how much opportunity is really out there, because there's a tremendous amount of business being done in the association space and in the worksite space. And again, you don't have to stop and become a worksite or association expert, but you may want to look for opportunities if they present themselves. So thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Perfect. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great one.
The next step is yours. Contact your marketer for more information and to start offering short-term care solutions to your clients. And be sure to sign up for our other short-term care hot topic webinars.